Well, so it's hard to believe, but Dave Batstone had a phone call yesterday morning during my scintillating welcome when you may recall I actually talked about him, but so I may repeat myself just a little bit, but I'm going to be short. So Dave Batstone truly is a Fred hero, tremendous inspiration to all of us. And it began at least from my getting to know you initially about you being a journalist. And so we have a certain theme here about how journalists, impactful journalists, really can have a major impact on the world. And so Dave, as I said yesterday, somehow came to discover that some of the servers at one of his favorite restaurants in San Francisco were enslaved, were humanly trafficked folks. He took the next 2 years to do research, 6 different countries, to write a book entitled Not for Sale, which then has led to him creating an organization, nonprofit called Not for Sale, whose purpose, of course, is to do everything possible to stop, or at least minimize, this multi-billion-dollar human trafficking industry in our world. But then beyond that, he's gone on to start several businesses under the umbrella of Just Business. And I think last year, now I may be wrong about this, but I think last year you had 6 going, and I think you have 10 going now. I mean, this guy doesn't sleep. And one of the things that was so exciting to me as somebody in the nonprofit world who's begged for money for 40 years was to actually see a model where he had for-profit initiatives that were supporting the nonprofit, and it was actually built together. And so huge inspiration in that way. But you want to hear from Dave, not from me. And so Dave Batstone, it's great to have you back. Great to have you as a hero. Here's the spotlight on you as a hero. And so thank you so much.
Well, listen, in a room full of heroes, it's really a bit humbling to be called that title. So I'll take it with a grain of salt. Really good to see a lot of you again this year. And for those of you that I didn't get to meet last year, I'll give a real quick recap of how I got to where I am. And then I think it's gone forward dramatically in the last 12 months. And I want to share that story and the insight that I'm learning, because I feel like if I'm not smarter this week than I was last week, then I'm doing something wrong, right? So how do I carry that attitude to what I approach, that, you know what, I'm probably missing something? And so it certainly was the case being in San Francisco. I went from being a journalist to a venture capitalist. That was a little bit of a jiu-jitsu move. I started a magazine with some Wired writers, among which I was one. And I was interviewing, people from eBay, Yahoo, all these Amazon, these small startups in Silicon Valley. And we were trying to figure out how to make things work. And my magazine is called Business 2.0. And so I'd ask, a founder about an auction software. We're going to connect buyers and sellers. Like, oh, that's really interesting. So, how are you going to make money on that? And then one founder would say, well, what we're thinking about is charging the buyer. Like, oh, okay. And then there'd be a pause, and he goes, what do you think of that? And I go, I don't know. I'd be worried about, the seller not feeling like, and he turns to the other founder. See, I told you that wouldn't work. You guys are making this stuff up. I think I'd rather make it up than write about people making it up. Right? So I became a venture capitalist. It wasn't that simple, but one day during an interview, a VC said to me, you know more about this industry than I do. And I said, yeah, but I don't know how to be a venture capitalist. He said, I can teach you that. Understanding the trends and where it's going and how to invest, that's instinct. So I became a venture capitalist. I'm in San Francisco. I'm not expecting to get another gig. I'm busy enough. When I learn about the fact that human trafficking has happened in my own backyard, in a restaurant that I used to frequent, the young kids came from the Bangalore, India area. They've been brought into San Francisco for the purpose of forced labor, modern slavery, serve dishes, to wait on tables, wash dishes, and then taken out to fruit and vegetable fields, brothels in Northern California. All right, so I decided to, I have this gene that many of you have called curiosity. It's our curse. I decided to go around the world and figure this out. I took a leave of absence from my bank, from my university where I'm a professor, and I said, I want to understand this and follow the money. And I went around the world, and I told last year how I went to Thailand. I met this extraordinary woman named Kru Nam. Kunam had been rescuing kids in the north of Thailand who came out of brothels and out of factories and out of street begging like Slumdog Millionaire. So together we created a village. And that village is now 10 years old. And the kids that I met 10 years ago with Kunam, they're now going to university and graduating. Very inspiring. And so my team at Not For Sale, we decided to continue the pattern. We went to Romania. We have 3 shelters on the border of Romania and Serbia for victims of human trafficking. We went to Thailand and Vietnam, and today we also are in Peru. When we went to Peru, after doing this work, and I shared last year that I felt like I shut down my brain and opened my heart, right? That's what you do when you try and solve a social problem. You open your heart, but you don't think about whether it's effective or not. Think about the thing you care about. Does it carry the same talent, technology, and capital that you bring to the things that you want to create companies with? They're often different worlds, if you know what I mean. Creating value, I know how to do that, bringing together capital, technology, and talent. When it came to solving human trafficking or extreme poverty, I built shelters. And my model was to come to like JB and say, hey, Jay, would you give me a donation, right? And then I spend it and I come back, ask him again for another donation. It's not sustainable, right? It's not viable as a model. So I had to begin to think and learn as I went around. One thing that I learned is that by creating a shelter, by doing social intervention, incredibly important work is who else is going to do it? Who else is going to save the children at the end of the river who are drowning? There's not enough resources. That is important work. It's not that is inconsequential, but it's understanding it in context that once you start doing that work, you learn a lot about the patterns in the economy and the cultures and the practices of exploitation. See, it sounds crass, but it's research and development. You're learning where people come from that have these problems. How do they fall into the river upstream? Why do so many women don't have opportunity for education? Well, you start to see the patterns when they're taken out of school, why they're not allowed to go to school. Why are there more victims of HIV/AIDS in Africa than men? You start seeing patterns, right? That's the data. Then what do you do with that data? So we decided that we would take that data and start to invest capital with talent, the top talent in the world, in an industry we did not know a lot about. We decided to create a beverage. And last year I shared the story of this beverage. It's called Rebel Roots Extract Bark Berry Leaves. Be a rebel. Don't drink the same old crap everybody else drinks. Coke. Be a rebel. And the way it works, we source the ingredients. I call it impact sourcing. We source the ingredients in the areas where we find the most risk. So initially, the Amazon of Peru. We have a great hibiscus mint with guaisana leaf, maca, mate, cat's claw. And we make a drink. We create jobs, economic platforms in communities that are at risk or taken advantage of. You sell it in markets in the United States that will take them. Now we're the #1 health beverage in America. I can't believe it. It's a miracle. And then you return proceeds back to those communities to create more equipping and empowerment. Right? It's not about teaching them to fish. It's giving them equity in the pond. Because if you don't have equity in the pond, someone will tell you, yeah, you know how to fish, but you can't come to this pond. How do you give them equity in the pond? All right, so that catches you up from last year. So I want to move a little bit forward because our thinking about this has developed. What are we doing here? Because it sounds like what? You're creating shelters, and then you're doing research about where the people who you're helping come from, and then you're creating beverage companies. Like, how do those three fit together? As Al said, there's got to be an integration and a hybrid that empowers both the business model and the NGO model. Because honestly, unless we in this room come up with solutions like this, my kids are going to be coming to your kids gathered here at Fred telling you how bad the world is. Right? And I'm not in this for a new gig, as I said. I want to solve this. And I think the mind power for doing so, the network for doing so, the resources for doing so are in this room. Right? If we in this room dedicated ourselves to the kind of change we'd like to see, we don't even need to recruit that many outside people. Let's start with what we have here. So for us, it begins at intervention. Where are we going to intervene? Right? In Vietnam, we discovered that young boys have no protection from the rule of law from being exploited by pedophiles and traffickers. There are laws for young girls, but not boys. The laws for girls aren't even applied or executed that well, but for boys, there's none. So, not for sale, we started an intervention. We worked with local Vietnamese activists who were on the ground, people who knew how to work with street kids, work with kids who were at risk, and provide shelters and the kind of security and safety they would need. So that's step one. We discover in the research and development that Vietnam as a country has tried to prevent urbanization by making it illegal to go to a health clinic outside of the province where you're from, where you're born, where you're from, your identity card. So you can't go to school, you can't go to a clinic, you can't get a job. This is their way to keep people at home. Now, you don't need to be a social scientist to think that probably won't work. People still migrate to urban areas, but now you have large populations that are at risk. So now you think, okay, we know now the patterns, we know the problems of why so many kids, young boys, end up in the streets of Hanoi or Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. We know that now. What's the enterprise solution that we can bring to that, or solutions? What I want to talk about, what we've learned, is that there's a value from starting the ground up, and there's a value starting with corporates that have resources from the top down. Now I want to look at both of those models and where they meet. In Vietnam, we partnered with Bumblebee Tuna, which is the largest tuna company in North America. They have operations in Southeast Asia, and the fishing industry, the tuna industry, is rife with problems, reputation problems. They said, we want to partner with you to create a new solution. So for starters, we promise, we pledge that every young boy who comes out of your shelter, we're going to employ. And then we're going to work with you in creating a development program so that not only do they have a factory job for a year, but from that year, after they learn the parameters of work and having a finance, and there's a certain kind of learning that goes on, then we want to help develop other skills if they want to go into finance, they want to go into market, other areas of the tuna industry. All right, so what I discovered then, how do I create impact? If I just stayed building shelters the rest of my life, I'm going to flatline at the top of intervention. You see what I mean? I can't build enough shelters. World Vision can't build enough shelters, as good as they are. United Nations, you know what? If we stay at the bottom of the stream, our impact will be flatlined at the level to which we can deliver a service. So in Thailand, I'm thrilled that I can help 150 kids at any one time, and they go to university, I get more kids in. But there's 450,000 ethnic tribal people at risk in the north of Thailand. How do I scale my impact? The more that I follow this curve, I learn more about the patterns of those 450,000 from my sample group, which is the 150, and then I create an enterprise that is sustainable and viable and can scale. Now I'm scaling impact. Are you with me? So I'm scaling impact through the model. Now I want to look at this because in the last year, had some pretty cool companies. Believe it or not, we had a few inventive ideas this last year. All right, the first one is a diamond company. I know some of you today spend some time with tools of biomimicry, using, say, 3D printing, for instance, or other tools for creating economy. Well, Spence Diamond is in North America, Canadian-based with a very strong presence in the United States market. They were concerned about a couple of things. One is the way that diamonds are mined. I think probably most of us know the term blood diamonds. Time magazine had a cover story a few months ago that said, blood diamonds, why we still have them. Nothing changed. We had the Kimberley process. We had Leonardo DiCaprio doing a film, for God's sakes, and it still didn't change. So what are the dynamics of that? very simple to see, too much money is being made from the perception that stones that are rare, scarcity, can be mined from places in the world where they can be done cheaply. There's a great book, by the way, called Stoned, as if you actually inhaled, Stoned. And it talks about how rare rocks are made into value. The Beers, how they made a diamond so expensive and rare and valuable. So Spence has this idea of how could we change the way that diamonds are sourced? They looked at biomimicry. How do we mimic what happens in the geological process of how a diamond is shaped? And so Spence was able to take a diamond chip, so you get the molecular structure of a diamond chip, and then you use intense heats of plasma ball that in a very encased chamber for 5 weeks, blasting it with the kind of heat that you would expect underground, right? And out comes a 3, 4, 5 carat diamond that a diamond expert cannot tell the difference from a diamond you get from Liberia, Congo. Carbon dating is the only way to tell the difference. The challenge is, I give you a diamond from an artisan, Spence, process, you go, oh, really? You didn't get me a real diamond? Right? Perception of value. So Spence came to us and said, you know what? We want to invent a way of thinking differently about the diamond and about what it means to share love and what it means to participate in a relationship. We really want to connect with Not For Sale, and we did a brainstorming session about what would that look like? How would we market that? So that now, every time someone buys an artisan diamond from Not For Sale, 1% goes to Not For Sale to be able to empower those kids who other diamond companies are exploiting in the mining of their own diamonds. It's going to open up in showrooms across North America starting in 3 weeks. It's going to be like an Apple store or a Tesla store where you go in with an experience. You know, people wear all black, look cool, hip, and you can see diamonds, and then go home and buy them online. But to me, have I done something different about creating value? I learned this. Slavery is not an industry. I got this wrong for so long. Again, my head shut down for too long. Slavery is not an industry, it's a tool. It's not just it's not apparel industry. It's not just sugar or commodities. It's a tool that enables people to generate more wealth and margin than paying fair wages or following an alternative process for production. So if I'm going to stop the problem of slavery, it's not only rule of law. We need rule of law. It's not only applying the prosecution of laws that are made. It's not only rescuing people who are drowning downstream, it's finding alternatives that disrupt and undermine the practices that make it profitable to use slavery today. If Spence can be successful, they are going to have a 50% margin advantage on those who try to get rocks from Congo. Now it's up to how do you change public perception? Because you're always selling a story. You're not selling a product, you're always selling a story. So how do you shift that perceptual field? And that has been a revelation to me around creating tools. I'm not fighting people and conglomerates per se, particularly in the anti-trafficking movement. I'm fighting tools that get replicated and used over and over again because they're successful over and over again. So it's another way of looking at how we address exploitation. Well, here's the other thing, though. How do we then begin to shift that perceptual frame so that I can be the person I want to be everywhere? I think a lot of us have diamonds on today that, you know what, there's no other way to get a diamond, and that was the way we express love. A lot of us are drinking coffee today, and I don't know where it comes from, but you know, it feels so difficult to be the person I want to be. I've come to a personal conviction that I do not want to wear people suffering anymore. I don't want to consume their tragedy when I have a drink in the morning with my coffee or my Coca-Cola or whatever. I don't want to trot on people's dreams with my designer shoes. I want to be everywhere. But we don't have the opportunities or options or alternatives to be everywhere. So I'm trying to change that. I was in the Amazon about 4 months ago. I wanted to go back on a journey to see firsthand the impact we're having with our beverage rebel. Right? It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to have sourcing, supply chain in place, but it's another thing to go and visit and see firsthand on the ground stories of communities. Has your life changed or not? I took my oldest son with me, who's 24, and on our journey, as we're going upstream, one of my Peruvian partners I've been working with for years, he kind of sheepishly came out when we were visiting a village upstream in the Amazon, and he showed it to me, and I go, wow, that's a really cool shoe you have there. I go, where'd you get that? And he kind of goes, well, you know, we made it from the things that are just around us. I go, what do you mean? So he takes me around and shows me, okay, here's cotton that we grow on trees. I'm used to cotton being a manufactured or engineered product that grows from the ground. Cotton that grows on trees, colored cotton, no less. I'm not used to that. Brown and blue cotton growing on trees. Sounds like something out of Dr. Seuss, I know, but it's true. And then he took me over to a tree, a rubber tree, where the natural rubber comes out of the tree. And he pieced together somewhat of a rudimentary looking shoe, but it was still pretty cool. He said, this is 100% organic. He goes, it's so vegan you could eat it. And I said, oh my gosh. I looked at my son, and before we had even gotten in the boat to come back home, back to the port, we had created a company. What if we created a shoe company? Again, the tools that enable freedom and empowerment, or tools that condition exploitation. The shoe industry in our lifetime, particularly the shoe industry around sweatshops and shoes around toxic shoes. I mean, every shoe you and I have in here today, including the ones I have on in my closet at home, they're going to be living in a landfill in 3 generations. My great-grandchildren are going to be coming to Fred, because I have this vision we're going to go on forever. Okay, they're going to come to Fred, and their shoes are going to be sitting in a garbage dump landfill somewhere. These shoes will return to the ecosystem in my lifetime. And in the sourcing of them, in the sourcing of those ingredients, here's the rubber that comes straight from the tree. It's very low tech. I'm working with the native tribes of the region to source this. Oh my gosh, it gives me the chance to be who I want to be and look really cool at it. Of course, to do that, I really need to figure out how to create a great shoe. And this is where the ecosystem of this room comes into play. Not specifically for this example, but you'll see. I have a partnership with All Saints Spitalfields. All Saints is a clothing company out of the UK. Way too hip and trendy for all of us, by the way. Well, except for a few of you, I'm sure. But they have made a 10-year partnership with me on rethinking how we have a transparent supply chain, how we do design, how we empower the people we work with on the ground. So I went to the CEO and I said, listen, I'm doing this shoe, told him the whole story, and he goes, could you help me? He goes, of course. In fact, the #1 shoe designer in the world helps us. He helps Gucci, Jessica Alba, and All Saints, among others. I'll have him do it. I'm sure he won't even charge you. So I take my shoe to New York. This is what you do. You walk with your shoe. I took it to New York, and he goes, oh, wow, I'd love to help you. You go, I kind of like 60% of it. I like the style, but you know, more comfort here, more design here. Kaboom. I got the #1 shoe designer in the world giving me my shoe design, right? So now it's, okay, how do I do this supply chain? If you know, this sounds really simple. You go, oh, I went up the Amazon, I found some cotton, I found some rubber, and he put a shoe together. It's a little bit more complicated than that, right? So what helped here is that Not For Sale had been working in the Amazon area for the last 5.5 years. We had done our R&D. We had the supply chain. We had the relationships with communities. We put together the whole supply chain in 4.5 months. And I don't know if you've ever created a product company, but to create an internationally linked and sourced product company in 4.5 months means that you are either a lunatic or a genius. And I'm neither. I had a supply chain in place, all right? So the idea was being able to connect the communities and then take those ingredients to Lima, which had the manufacturing capacity at another plant that was giving dignity to the workers in that factory, and then straight from there to San Francisco, which is our global hub for distributing the shoes. The goal is to create an economic catalyst in communities who, for far too long, have had to rely on indignity, have had to be the victims of whatever new industry would come along that would use them as a tool to maximize their profits. Mining, logging, charcoal, and now even the carbon credit industry sees them as a target for monetizing their space without taking into account what it means for these tribes in their future. So creating these economic platforms, creating this initiative, it gives them another way of thinking differently about who they are and their destiny in the world. Meanwhile, I know I'm crazy. I'm going to take on the shoe industry. Sorry, those of you in the room that do work with Nike, I know. But I'm going to take it on because it's not acceptable in the 21st century to have a shoe that's going to live 3 generations. It's not acceptable in the 21st generation to not give people fair wages. And I know that that has been a progress. It's not the same as it was 30 years ago, but we can do better. 21st century companies need to have dignity in the way they treat the environment and the people who live in it. And I'll be damned if I'm going to sit by and buy one more product that doesn't express and embed that dignity. That is something that we can do. And I think we can now challenge large corporates to show it can be done. That's why Z Shoes is important. It enables us to show this can be done. Rebel, Coca-Cola now wants to buy us. We're not going to do it, but they want to buy us because we've shown it can be done. You know what I'm saying? Instead of thinking, well, you can, I mean, when I started Rebel, you're never going to compete against existing beverage companies. I go, yeah, I know. We shoot our pioneers and our inventors before they even get out of the ground. How do we get behind them? How do we encourage them? And how do we say, you know what? I want to help you make that dream possible. We have dreamers in this room. We have people with networks in this room. We have people who know how to do stuff in this room. Let's do that to make a better world. I want you to help me walk like a hero. Now, I'm not going to turn this into Target today, by the way, but we have a very limited number of shoes. We launched yesterday. I was telling my sister over here, she said, oh, when did this company start? I said, about 24 hours ago. We went live 24 hours ago. So our first run was very limited, but Heidi and I and Ann, we're going to be over here where David Williams is. We're going to sit next to him. And if you want to get a pair of shoes to share with someone to tell this story, help us join the movement, right? Be a part of a movement. This is a movement bigger than just, oh, I got a new pair of shoes. This is another way of thinking about the world we want to live in. Because I want to be everywhere, don't you? Thank you very much. Great to be here tonight. Thank you very much. I kept looking over because you were my canary in the coal mine. So I said, you better have some caffeine. She said, I don't drink caffeine. So just keep looking over. If I'm asleep, you're in trouble. All right. So I think we have like a time for some questions, right, Al? We have 5 minutes. So very succinct questions. Or one long 5-minute speech that poses a question, one way or the other. Yeah.
Are there negative side effects to what you're doing by having a business and an enterprise?
It's a great question. It's around measuring impact. And we think about, well, what's positive impact? But you raised the question of negative impact. And I've been working with some people at Stanford to go another step. Well, what would be the impact on this community if you were not here? And so it's really, impact is a very complicated and very important. We actually work right now in partnership with the University of California, Berkeley, on developing a model where which we have a baseline, and that quarterly we can look at the baseline of the things we want to impact. So what are the things we want to impact in our region? We want more young girls to go to school, right? We want to obviously reduce the rate of human trafficking in the region. we want to look at the number of fair wage jobs that are created. So we have a baseline, and so as an investor in Rebel or in Z Shoes or any other company that we do, you get a financial report, but you also get a social report. Right? So you get to see how your company is doing. It's really fascinating to see, for some people, the social report's the most important. For the other, the financial report is most important. And so sometimes I fall into it. When a company of ours is doing really poorly financially, one of my 10, Al, then I feel like I failed, even though actually it's the most impactful socially. Then I got to think, okay, well, really, what am I trying to accomplish? Both. Any other comments or questions? Yeah. Pardon me? How can you help? All right, listen, I need folks who believe in this and get behind me. So it's really, joining this and sharing with other people the story, and that indeed it's possible in the shoe industry of all things to be able to create different alternatives. You can join that movement today, and I'll give you a pair of shoes even. So it really is a matter of this group here. Again, I'm not being rhetorical. I really believe what happens in this room, if we just locked all the doors and we said, okay, for the next 24 hours, we're going to decide for the next 12 months how we're going to shift something, we could do it. And so I'm just asking one of those things be Z Shoes. So I would love and love that people get involved, at least at any level, to support. Yeah.
This would be a threat to people like De Beers, the document.
Yes.
How are you prepared for that?
Sure. That's a very good comment, because it's the Diamond Project might be a threat to De Beers and others who are operating in East and Central Africa. Obviously, the shoe company, there is no one in Portland today that's shaking in their boots for what's going on here. All right, or wherever else in the world. But the Diamond Company, because you're talking about capital is behind Spence, and they have significant resources, and they're going to tell that story, and they're going to blast it out. My guess is that De Beers will try to reinforce the notion, oh yeah, you mean one of those factory diamonds. I really do believe they'll try to, oh, you don't love your wife or your girlfriend or your partner enough to get them a real diamond? You're going to give them a fake diamond? I'm sure that's what's going to happen. So it's the storytelling game. And so really it's a matter of storytellers. Heidi said, I would rather to have that. I would want my husband to buy, right? So, and she's sincere. Of course, she's crazy too, but she works with me, of course. So, it really is a matter of storytelling. I have someone that works with me that did the game Candy Crush. He goes, David, you have to keep remembering, you're not selling a product, you're selling a story. It's so important for all of us, right? And what is the story that people want to see themselves a part of? What is the story that you want to see your part? I know the story I want to be a part of. And unfortunately, for most of my life, I've had to make these little and big compromises because I had no other way of doing it. But now, I can be a venture capitalist that invests in dignity. Are you kidding me? I can build companies that customers like you want to be a part of because you like the story. I couldn't have done that 10, 15 years ago. And now, I can actually, it's beyond even the diamond industry relative to the mining. Look at all the strip mining that goes on in getting those diamonds. We're talking about not an extractive manufacturing process, but an additive practice. If you start using that towards everything we make today, wow, what are the implications for environment? What are the implications for people?
I love the concept. A couple questions. Do you have women's shoes as well as men's?
We do. So we actually, only because we launched yesterday, our women's shoes are being done right now. So I'm going to be blasting that out in about a week. But this is really on the fly. This is like I got dressed about 3 minutes before I got up here kind of thing, right? So this is, the first 50 shoes of all we've sold. But there are men and women's. The women's colors are a maroon red and a little darker charcoal than the gray here. So, and then just to give you, for those of you who love shoes, because when I get depressed, I go out and buy a pair of shoes. I don't know what you do. The thing is that we want to then do limited edition, world famous artists who will design the shoe in like 2,000 pairs, that they have their own design on top of the cotton. So we're talking to a Brazilian graffiti artist who's very well known throughout the Americas. He's going to do our first design of our limited edition shoe. Because again, we have to find ways to find a niche audience. I've got to be the best damn shoe in the world. I'm not going to sell you shoes I feel, hey, you should feel bad, buy my shoes. That's called guilt wear. You'll buy it once and never buy it again. I have to find the best design. I have to be the best beverage. I think Rebel is incredible. If you haven't tried it, you can get it in a store anywhere in the United States if you're there. Not in Europe yet, sorry. I think our Square Bar, our protein bar, it's kicking ass because it's so good. So we have to be excellent. I go to MIT, Harvard, or Stanford, and I talk to students, and they go, oh, I love what you're doing. If I can't get a job at Goldman Sachs, I'd love to come work with you. I'm like, what the frick? I don't want you. You're a loser. Goldman Sachs doesn't want you. What do I want you? You see, I want the best and the brightest. Because we have to be better, smarter, excellent. Because not only do we have to be profitable like everyone else out there, we have to be better because we're also creating dignity in our products. We need smart people. So if you're from a smart company that wants to change the world, I'd love to engage with you. Next year, I'd like to be here telling our story, not my story. So let's connect. Thanks very much.